In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad al-Dib stumbled upon a cave near the Dead Sea. What he found there forced the world to rethink its understanding of ancient prophecy. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, there was one manuscript unlike the others, a commentary on the prophet Ezekiel, speaking of wars in the last days. For decades, scholars kept its contents hidden. Why? Because this ancient text described, with unsettling accuracy, the conflicts of our time. Wars that once seemed chaotic and senseless suddenly revealed a darker logic, as if an unseen hand was moving the pieces on history's chessboard, directing nations like figures in a game whose rules we cannot fully grasp. When I first read the translation of this fragment, a chill ran down my spine. The words spoke of northern lands rising against a people gathered from many tribes, of fire falling from the sky, of a time when the sword would not depart from the earth. Were they writing about our own days 2,000 years ago? Imagine the moment when you realize what looks like chaos is, in fact, part of a plan so vast that the human mind cannot truly comprehend it. The wars we witness today are not random outbursts of cruelty. They are chapters in a book written long before the first empires rose. And yet the most terrifying question remains: if God is truly almighty and merciful, why does he allow such horrors? Why does he permit children to die beneath bombs? Why is he silent when mothers cry out over their fallen sons? For centuries, believers have struggled with this question, and perhaps the answer still lies hidden in those ancient scrolls, discovered long ago in a cave by a shepherd boy. Today, we will attempt to unravel this mystery. We will journey from ancient prophecy to modern warfare. We will seek to understand what truly lies behind the words, "There shall be war until the end." Prepare yourself for a journey that may transform not only how you see history, but how you see the meaning of what is happening right now. On October 12th last year, a Russian missile struck a playground in the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia. Among the dead was a 7-year-old girl named Alina, who had dreamed of becoming a ballerina. Her mother stood among the ruins, holding her daughter's tiny dance shoes, crying to the sky, "Where are you, God? Why did you allow this?" This question echoes through every war and every generation. It pierces human history as a cry of the soul demanding an answer. If God exists, if he is truly almighty and merciful, why does the world drown in blood? Why do children die for the sins of adults? Why does good so often seem to lose against evil? Philosophers call this the problem of theodicy, an attempt to justify God in the face of evil. But for ordinary people who have lost loved ones, this is not a philosophical riddle. It is pain that tears the soul apart. It feels like betrayal by the one who is supposed to protect them. Atheists use this argument as their strongest proof that God does not exist. Look at the world, they say. Look at the wars, the suffering, the injustice. What kind of good God would allow this? And their words resonate deeply in the hearts of those who have lost hope. And what about believers? Some lose faith, unable to reconcile the image of a loving God with the reality of a cruel world. Others hide behind phrases about a divine plan, without truly grasping what those words mean. Still others refuse to think at all, afraid that the questions themselves will destroy their faith. But what if there is another way? What if the answer does exist, but lies so deep within the fabric of reality that it requires a completely different approach to understanding divine justice. Think of a surgeon cutting open a body with a scalpel. To the untrained eye, it looks like cruelty, but the surgeon cuts in order to save a life. What if, on the scale of eternity, what we perceive as the cruelty of history is in fact something entirely different? The ancient prophets spoke of war not only as a curse but as a tool for cleansing, testing, and shaping. "The wrath of man shall praise you," wrote the psalmist. But what does that mean in the harsh light of history? To begin to understand, we must look at how the prophets of old described the purpose of wars within the divine plan. And at the center of this path stands the mysterious prophet, Ezekiel, with his visions of conflicts yet to come. In the 6th century B.C., the prophet Ezekiel received one of the most terrifying and mysterious visions in human history. He saw the chariot of God, a strange structure of wheels within wheels, covered with eyes looking in every direction. These eyes symbolize the all-seeing gaze of providence, which beholds not only the present, but also the future. In chapters 38 and 39 of his book, Ezekiel recorded a prophecy that Christian theologians have wrestled with for centuries. He spoke of Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, who would come from the north in the last days, attacking the land of Israel like a storm cloud covering the earth. For a long time, these words seemed like abstract symbols, but modern scholars of biblical geography noticed something striking. The names Ezekiel used closely matched the ancient names of lands that overlap with modern Russia. Rosh echoes the word for Rus. Meshech resembles Moscow. Tubal is linked to Tobolsk. Could this be mere coincidence? A prophet living in the 6th century B.C., describing a geopolitical conflict of the 21st century A.D.? Even more astonishing, Ezekiel predicted the nature of this attack, its suddenness, its cruelty, and above all, its ultimate failure through God's own intervention. This is what the sovereign Lord says: "On the day Gog attacks the land of Israel, my fury will be aroused. In my zeal and blazing wrath, there will be a great earthquake in the land." These are not simply words about an ancient war. They are a code that reveals the divine strategy for modern conflicts. But the most frightening aspect of this prophecy is not the description of the war itself, but its purpose. God allows the invasion of Gog for a higher reason. "And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord." Picture a chess player who deliberately sacrifices pieces in order to set up a winning move. What looks like defeat is actually part of the victory. This is how the ancient prophets described divine guidance over history. Ezekiel saw not only specific wars, but the principle behind them, that God can use even the malice of enemies to achieve his purposes. The aggressor thinks he acts by his own will, but in reality, he plays a role in a script written long before his birth. That is why the prophet did not describe future wars with despair, but with confidence. He knew the end of the story. He knew that even the most terrifying wars would serve a greater purpose: the cleansing of humanity and the triumph of divine justice. Yet Ezekiel was not the only one who foresaw such visions. In the book of Revelation, the Apostle John gave an even more detailed account of how the wars of the last days would unfold in the final act of human history. I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. With these words, the Apostle John described the fourth horseman of the Apocalypse, the most terrifying of the four. The first horseman symbolized conquest, the second civil war, the third famine. But the fourth carried death itself in its purest form. The earliest Christians tried to imagine what kind of weapon could kill a quarter of the world's population. They thought of swords, spears, and arrows. They could not have imagined that 2,000 years later, human beings would create bombs capable of turning entire cities into ash within seconds. Bombs whose radiation would continue to kill for decades after the explosion. On August 6, 1945, when an American bomber dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, the world saw for the first time the true face of the fourth horseman. The temperature at the blast's center reached 1,000,000 degrees. People were reduced to shadows on walls. Those who survived carried burns so horrific that doctors did not know how to treat them. Today, there are more than 13,000 nuclear warheads in the world, enough to destroy civilization several times over. And this is no abstract threat. Every day, political leaders make decisions that could bring humanity closer to nuclear catastrophe. The war in Europe has shown just how thin the line is between a conventional conflict and apocalypse. But does this mean that God merely watches as humanity rushes toward self-destruction? Is nuclear power proof that the divine plan has failed, that human evil has conquered divine wisdom? John the Revelator paints a different picture. He writes that even the most terrifying disasters are still under divine authority. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. Power was given, not seized, not stolen, but granted as part of the plan. This does not mean that God delights in death. Ezekiel himself records God's words. "Do I take any pleasure in the death of the wicked?" declares the sovereign Lord. "Rather am I not pleased when they turn from their ways and live." So why then such dreadful visions? Why did the prophets describe future wars and disasters in such detail? The answer lies in the way divine teaching works. Imagine a father who sees his child walking toward danger. He could stop the child by force, taking away freedom of choice. Or he could allow the child to learn, through painful experience, where that path leads. Love often requires the second path, even when it comes with suffering. Humanity has been given incredible power, the power to create and to destroy on a scale unimagined by the ancients. Nuclear weapons are not an accident of history. They are a test of maturity, a test to see whether our species can wield such power with wisdom or whether we will destroy ourselves in pride and rage. The fourth horseman is not punishment, but a lesson in what happens to a civilization that abandons morality. A lesson in the price of arrogance and the necessity of humility before higher laws of existence. And this lesson becomes even more urgent when we view today's conflicts through the lens of ancient prophecies about the signs of the last days. When Jesus was asked by his disciples what signs would mark the approach of the end of the age, he spoke plainly. "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." These words are recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, Chapter 24. For centuries, Christians interpreted these prophecies in different ways. Some saw them as describing the fall of Jerusalem in the 1st century. Others saw them as metaphors for spiritual battles. But today, in an era when war has once again returned to the heart of Europe, these words sound with a frightening literalness. The Apostle Paul wrote that in the last days, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good. Does this not describe the very spirit of our age? Look at the wars of the 20th and 21st centuries. They are no longer fought only for territory, but for ideologies, for control of resources, for global domination. The cruelty unleashed in these conflicts often defies rational explanation. Cities reduced to rubble, civilians targeted deliberately, propaganda turning truth into lies and lies into truth. The war in Ukraine is a vivid example of this. Here we see not only tanks and missiles, but also the weaponization of information, culture, and even faith. It is not just a clash of armies, but a clash of worldviews, one built on freedom and dignity, the other on domination and fear. Jesus did not say these wars would be the end itself. Rather, he called them the beginning of birth pains. Wars are signs, signals that history is moving toward its climax. They are tremors before the final earthquake. They remind us that humanity cannot build lasting peace on its own foundation of pride. But here lies the paradox. While wars reveal the brokenness of the world, they also reveal the urgency of choosing a different path. They strip away illusions, showing that neither wealth, nor power, nor technology can save us. Only a return to the eternal foundation can. The sign of the times is not only the presence of wars, but the moral atmosphere that makes them possible. A society driven by greed and hatred inevitably produces conflict. But a society rooted in love, truth, and humility can resist the spiral of destruction. The prophets and apostles did not describe wars to frighten us, but to awaken us. They wanted us to see in these events not only tragedy, but also a call to vigilance, to repentance, to a readiness for the coming of the kingdom. And if we recognize the signs of the times in our own days, then the question is no longer whether the end is near. The question is, how will we respond? The name Gog appears only a few times in the Bible, yet it has become one of the most chilling symbols of ultimate evil. Ezekiel calls him the Prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. John, in the book of Revelation, writes that Gog and Magog will gather the nations for the final battle against the people of God. For centuries, theologians debated who Gog might represent. Some said it was an ancient tribe lost in history. Others believed it was a symbol of all enemies of God's people. But in recent generations, many interpreters have seen a connection with Russia, the northern empire whose ambitions have shaken the world time and again. Consider Ezekiel's description: an army from the far north, vast and cruel, invading lands of peace and prosperity. This echoes the very pattern of Russian invasions, from the Tsars to Stalin to today. The prophecy speaks not of one battle, but of a recurring force in history, a spirit of aggression rising again and again under different banners. Yet Ezekiel also makes clear Gog is not invincible. His power is permitted for a time, but it has an end. God himself promises to strike down Gog with earthquakes, fire, and hailstones. The message is unmistakable. The aggressor who defies heaven will ultimately be destroyed. This does not mean that every Russian person is Gog. The Bible speaks not of ethnicity, but of a system, a power, a spirit. The mystery of Gog is the mystery of human pride raised to the level of idolatry, a nation or leader who sets himself in the place of God, demanding worship, obedience, and absolute control. In this sense, Gog is not limited to one country. He appears wherever tyranny seeks to enslave the human spirit. In ancient Babylon, in the Roman Empire, and totalitarian regimes of the 20th century, and today, once again, in the brutal face of a new empire rising from the north. But why does God allow Gog to rise at all? Ezekiel gives the answer. So I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Gog's arrogance becomes the very stage on which divine justice is revealed. The wars of our time are not random outbursts of cruelty. They are part of a larger drama, a struggle between light and darkness that reaches its climax in the final conflict described by John, the Battle of Armageddon. And yet, even as Gog rises, the prophets remind us that history is not in his hands. The last word belongs not to dictators or empires, but to the Lord of history himself. From the very beginning of Scripture, Babylon is more than just a city. It is a symbol, the embodiment of arrogance, idolatry, and rebellion against God. The Tower of Babel was the first attempt to build a human-made path to heaven, a civilization that declared, "We will make a name for ourselves." Centuries later, the prophet Isaiah described Babylon as the glory of kingdoms, the splendor of pride. But he also foretold its downfall. Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms, will be overthrown by God like Sodom and Gomorrah. For the Israelites, Babylon became the ultimate image of oppression and exile. It was the power that destroyed their temple and carried them into captivity. In the New Testament, the Apostle John takes this image further. In the book of Revelation, Babylon is no longer just an ancient city, but a global system of corruption, greed, and tyranny. He speaks of Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth, a power that intoxicates the nations with her immorality. Throughout history, many empires have taken on the role of Babylon. Rome, with its persecution of Christians, the Third Reich with its cult of race and violence, the Soviet Union with its militant atheism and totalitarian control. And today we can see the same spirit at work once again, a new Babylon rising, clothed in the garments of nationalism, propaganda, and imperial ambition. But Babylon is more than politics. It is a mindset, a way of life. It is the belief that human power, wealth, and ideology can replace God. It is the seduction of a world that promises greatness while leading to destruction. This is why John calls Babylon the great prostitute, a system that sells the soul of humanity for temporary pleasures and empty promises. And just as ancient Babylon fell in a single night, the prophets assure us that the final Babylon will also collapse suddenly. For in 1 hour her doom has come. Her merchants will weep, her kings will tremble, and the nations will stand in shock at the downfall of what seemed invincible. Why does Scripture return again and again to this image? Because every generation faces its own Babylon. Every believer must choose whether to be seduced by its glittering promises or to remain faithful to a higher kingdom. Babylon is not only out there in the world. It lurks within every heart that chooses pride over humility, selfishness over love, idols over the living God. The enigma of Babylon is that it always seems undefeatable, and yet it always falls. Empires rise and crumble, but the kingdom built not by human hands endures forever. So where does this leave us? If the prophets are right, if history truly moves toward a climax, then we are not merely spectators of world events. We are participants in a struggle that encompasses all of humanity. The book of Revelation speaks of Armageddon, the final battle between good and evil, light and darkness. But it is not only a war of armies. It is a war of choices, of values, of loyalties. Every person is drawn into it, whether they realize it or not. There are no bystanders in this story. There are only those who choose, consciously or unconsciously, on which side they will stand. For Ukraine, this reality is felt with particular sharpness. Our suffering has become a mirror held up to the world. Through our pain, the nations are confronted with a question: will you stand with truth or with lies? With freedom or with tyranny? With life or with death? The prophets remind us that wars are not the end. They are birth pains, heralds of a coming renewal. But they also warn that the choices we make now determine whether we are ready for that renewal, or whether we will be swept away with the powers that oppose it. What comes next is not written in stone for each of us individually. We are given freedom and with it responsibility. The same God who directs the course of nations also knocks at the door of every heart. And he asks each of us the same question: will you trust me? Will you follow me? Will you choose life? History may be moving toward its conclusion, but the story of your soul is still being written. And the final chapter depends not only on what happens on battlefields, but on what happens in the quiet decisions of faith and the choices made in homes, families, and hearts. So as we close this journey, remember, the end of the world is not simply about destruction. It is about unveiling the revelation of what truly matters, of who truly reigns, and of what destiny awaits those who choose the side of light. The question is no longer, why does God allow war? The question now is, what will you do with the time you have been given? And that question, no ancient scroll can answer for you. It can only be answered by your own life.